What would you like to do?
Your choice.
It's your choice, right? So let's say that the scenario is there's no 220, okay? And you call me and you say, hey, I need your 220, and I tell you, it's not that I have one and I won't give it to you, I don't have one. You're like, well, this is my favorite one, and I'm picking on you just for a second. Well, my buyer told me they don't want to see any houses that the seller's not paying. I think 9 times out of 10 you hear that, that's bullshit. Just my opinion. But the one time that it's true, that's fine, that's their decision, right? So if you say to me, my buyer, I've already talked to my buyer, and they have made it very clear that they will not look at this house unless they have the comfort of knowing that they don't have to pay that commission. I'm gonna look at you and say, send me their 220, I'll have a conversation with my seller. And then I'm gonna call you, and I'm gonna say, we have a situation where they wanna show the property. The buyer, for whatever reason, doesn't wanna look at anything that they might have to pay the commission for. They only wanna purchase properties that the seller will co-op for them. If we don't sign it, which it sounds like to me there's a good chance they won't even show the house. Okay, you can call bluff if you want, whatever. I'm just telling you that based on my conversation, I believe that there's a good chance the showing won't happen. Then you're gonna say, well, what's the downside of signing it? And my response is gonna be nothing. There is no downside. There's no downside to it, Mr. Seller. Because let's say that we sign it, okay? The showing happens, now you're the new buyer. Now you just fired her now. So you two now look at the house. She falls in love with it. She makes an offer. We just negotiate the price the way we want it to be. We're not going to negotiate this commission. We're not going to say we're only going to pay you 1% now because we've already guaranteed him 2.5%.
Right.
It's so logical.
But we're just going to make the price. Hey, Mr. If you want the house, you got to pay $515.
I think we overcomplicate things. It's the same pie.
Yep.
You slice it and dice it the way you want.
Exactly.
Exactly. I keep hearing all of these conversations, and in my mind, it doesn't matter.
But here's the thing that I finally came to terms with. Not everybody it makes sense to.
Right.
It does to me, and I'm like, how does this dumbass figure this out? I mean, but then I'm like, wait a minute. They don't have the same things that we have. Maybe they didn't go through, I mean, look at me being sympathetic to people.
I know.
When did that happen?
You're dating it?
You're going soft, huh?
I know, right? But it's just one of those things where not everybody gets it. But in that scenario, I would go to my seller and say, look, here's the pros and cons of you signing it. I don't really know what the con is. So I would encourage him to sign it, and if he says, no, I'm not signing it, I'm gonna go back to you and say, hey, you just won't. I mean, I talked to him about the pros and cons, and his decision was that he's not gonna do it.
Yeah.
And then now you have a decision to make. And if you say, forget it, screw him, he's a jerk, I'm not gonna show his house, that's your negative consequence.
That's right. Okay.
It's a natural consequence that she didn't look at the house because you wouldn't sign it. But I'm telling you, if you sign it, there's no real harm.
Doesn't mean you're gonna accept an offer.
We've got a question back there too. Yeah.
I can't hear.
Speak up just a little bit
She
for
said
everybody.
she's got some people that won't be able to afford the commission. That part of her conversation with them is, well, we're gonna try and source other ways for me to get paid to advocate on your behalf.
My question is, though, open house, right? You have an open house. I think the conversation has to be done early, right? Like letting your seller know, right, what to expect to pay.
No, completely disagree with you.
I would disagree too.
That's what got us here.
Well,
Yeah.
how many times, so let's say I put a listing and I have 20 people that wanna see it. Are we going to now be signing these forms every, 20 forms a day if somebody wants to see it?
Hold on, a question, and I'm gonna rewind so that we get, so we're talking about, you represent the seller, correct? you have a signed 220 and an agreement on what your seller's going to pay.
I don't have a signed 220, but
Okay.
I wanna let them know
So
that they.
you represent the seller, there's no signed 220,
Right,
and you
if I
have,
go that route,
and you have 20 showings. So 20 agents are gonna call you, right? But, hell yes, like, this is the
That's
part that I
right.
am lost, hell yes, 20 agents are gonna call you.
Yes.
First of all, that is the best business practice known to man, is to actually have a conversation
Yes.
with the listing agent. This is, well, I'm gonna have to answer my phone 20 times. Oh, I'm sorry, like, you wanna, like, that part blows my mind. But yes, you're gonna have to answer the phone 20 times. If you do not have a time 20, you do exactly what David just did with the seller here. You can either say to your seller, would you like to have the 220s presented to you if they will not show the house prior to that being signed? Or for now, would you just like to say, we're gonna consider the 220s with offer? And then that's what you relay to the buyer's agent.
Laura, let me
Open
ask a question.
Well,
Laura, approximately how many showings have we had when we put 0 in the MLS? So we were putting 0 about a week before, maybe 2 weeks before it was taken out. Now, go ahead, throw rocks at me, it's fine. So how many, approximately, how many showings on all of the listings that we had that had 0, which in my mistake is 3, right? We had 3 that had 0. We had a couple that said, no, I wanna do it. We're like, okay, great, so we put 2 and a half in there. Approximately how many showings in totality did we have on those 3? 15, 20?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
How many of them asked for a 220 prior to the showing?
0, yeah.
I knew that. I did not know that, I promise. But I didn't. Trust me, I did not know. I had a strong feeling it was gonna be really low. I didn't think it was gonna be 0. I just don't think that we're gonna have 20 showings and 20 agents call us and ask us for Form 220.
But you might, because it's really going around the forums.
Well,
I mean, I think it's gonna become more of a thing.
Okay, all right.
And
I'm just saying it's gonna
before
become
12 o'clock, we did. We had, starting at 7 o'clock in the morning.
People
call.
calling?
Not asking for the one asked for the 220, was with Compass, and here's what I wanna say to everybody. Explain where we come from nicely, right? You don't have to be rude, right? Because every company is doing differently, and every company has a misconception, but not one didn't show. We don't have a 220 either. I said, we're gonna honor something, but it needs to come with the offer, right? And so, but we did have phone calls. You can answer your phone.
Yeah.
That's the other side of it.
So
Listing agents don't like to answer their phone.
Right.
If
But
you,
that's
That's
a
what you do
general-
it,
that's a
though.
general
You do it.
statement, that's a general statement. I love to answer my phone as a listing agent.
All right, I'll rephrase it for you. A lot of them. I cannot tell you how many transactions I've had.
do you
When
know
I
the
call
number?
the agent and they text me back, and I went from 0 to the end, never spoke to
Do you
them.
know the #1 complaint of realtors from the consumer for at least the last 10 years
Exactly.
running? They don't answer their
They don't
phone.
answer the phone.
They don't answer their phone.
That's because we're selling insurance.
That is a problem.
So I promise
And I would say
you, you
that-
are going to have a problem getting a hold of this agent.
Yes,
I know.
it's gonna happen.
Period.
It's gonna happen.
You're gonna have a problem with it. It's just, you're
Hopefully
going.
this will change that a little bit.
I'm hoping
So
so.
it's funny,
I'm
Gavin-
hoping it's going to, because the issue is being, right, that there's a discrepancy between like the consumer and the client. My prayer is that with all of this, it's actually gonna weed out agents that do their clients a disservice and leaves more for those agents who can actually advocate and communicate with their clients. To create, but we have to tread, the mucky water to get there. And I think that's why it's so important that we focus on yourself and what you're doing. And then it's again, the listing agent hasn't answered the phone. At this point, I don't know whether they're going to offer compensation to a buyer's agent. What would you like to do?
Can I say one thing too? Look at the agent-to-agent remarks. Because there is no reason, let me think this through. So if you called me and you said you wanted Form 220, I'm going to say to you something very similar to what she said. We do not have a 220 form. However, my seller understands the importance of buyer agency and having, and co-oping with buyer's agents. So when you present the offer, present your 220 with it, I'm insinuating in a way, because I am going to tell my sellers, we're gonna get offers with, buyers don't wanna pay.
Right.
They're not used to it. The buyer is the one that's asking you, the seller, to pay that fee for them. This agent is not asking you to pay her fee.
Right.
Right.
That's so important.
She is asking you to pay her fee on her behalf.
Right.
So she can buy stuff. Maybe.
So the buyer is the one that's asking you, the seller, to pay that fee. That is massively different than her saying, I'll bring you a buyer if you give me X.
Right.
Yeah. That's
Huge difference.
Right.
So I'm gonna say to you as a seller, listen, here's what I charge, this is what I charge. However, when we get offers, you should expect that most buyers are going to ask you as part of their offer to pay that fee for them. How much is it? No clue. I don't know how much it is. We just negotiated a fee. They're gonna negotiate a fee. They may have a different fee. They may have a different fee. They may have a different fee. I don't, Mr. Sal, I don't know what that is. We won't know until we get the offer. And then if for some reason she calls me and says, I'm not gonna show you the house, then I'll come to you and say, hey, just sign this form. This isn't for everybody. This is for this one showing.
Can we put the 220 language in the agent remarks?
So I don't think we can put, I know I would never put 220 remarks in there. However,
The understanding what you just said.
the-
Our seller understands the
can,
importance of the
can
220.
we write,
Or I wouldn't even say that, like,
And the last one.
You shouldn't have to say that.
no,
It's crazy.
I would be real conscious
Yeah, I would-
because I think every listing that goes in right now is going to be gone through with a fine tooth
Yes.
comb.
yeah,
That for me would be when somebody booked.
Yeah.
So again, I advocate the other way around. As a listing agent, when somebody books a showing, especially luxury or a high-end showing,
Oh, I'm calling.
I'm calling.
Right.
And I'm gonna say, thank you so much for booking your appointment, tell me a little bit about your buyer, and then I would weed into the conversation, hey, we value buyer agents here. I don't have a 220 signed yet, however, we are expecting one, send it over with the offer. But I'm always open in that line of communication, and again, I go back to the words I said, don't be frightened of the conversation. That's agent to agent or agent to client. Like, we do have not great agents in the business, however, some of them are freaking awesome. Like, don't write them all off just yet. Some of them are gonna be working their way through, the muddied water. Give a little bit of grace. Like, that's the other one too. There is not one person that is gonna get this right this month. It's not gonna happen, right? None of us are perfect. So give some grace, give a little bit of space, and take it step by step. Leon?
I think what you said earlier too is going back to our lenders, right? I've talked to a few lenders that are offering commission gap solutions, where they're actually bundling it in.
Can you speak to that right now? I'm throwing you on the
Yes.
spot.
No, you're good. So
Sorry.
we don't have anything actively in place like that type of product. I know they've talked about it and they're working on bringing on investors for that. Right now, we don't have anything specific towards that. But I know a lot of lenders are starting to bring that on.
Yeah, they're out there, and it is up to 3%, and I think the difference on like a $600,000 house and a payment is actually like $70 a month or something like that for them to bundle that right in there, so.
So it's having solutions, right? It's like being the problem solver, not the problem focuser. Yep.
Yeah, one of the things that strikes me when somebody says, well, I'm not showing the house because my buyer can't afford my commission. Like that is in the buyer's agency consultant timeframe, when there are so many programs out there for first-time home buyers or lower income buyers. First of all, there is a ton, an absolute ton. So there's that, there's seller concessions, there's the 220. I don't see why, if an agent would say, well, I'm not seeing it, they're not understanding what else is available to the buyers and
Correct.
not advocating enough for the buyers.
If the
One
agent is saying it, it's a massive problem.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if the buyer is telling the agent, we have to do the direction of our client. If my buyer tells me, I will not look at a house without a 220 sign, what am I supposed to do?
Well, that would be an education thing about all the other ways to be able to pay my commission.
I 1000% wholeheartedly agree with you, right? I think that is when we sit down and have the conversation, we talk through, like whenever I've done a buyer agency agreement, I was told by the best too, that we highlight that section,
Right.
right? Hey, this is the fee that I charge, this is the reason that I charge it. There are a number of ways for us to look at sourcing this fee depending on financially what you need.
Right.
And then we can talk about that conversation. Here's what I do encourage everybody. You operate at a high level when you educate and advocate for your buyers. Not everybody is gonna do that, focus on you.
Oh, for sure,
And,
yeah. for
you know
sure.
what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, we can't change everybody
Mhm.
to operating the way that so you run in your lane and you do the absolute best you can for your clients and stay in that positive space and don't deal with the time sucks.
I do think though that, and Keely and I talked about this, I do think that we need some sort of class or education for us agents
Yep.
about that specific thing, or those
Absolutely.
conversations
Yeah.
with buyers.
Laura?
I just wanna say too, just kinda thinking back at, how bold we were, you know, a few weeks ago by going ahead and putting the 0 in there, you know, before the buyer compensation disappeared. And I can probably tell you that there were a whole lot of agents and a whole lot of buyers who could have gotten everything they would have asked for if they hadn't made the assumption that the seller wasn't going to pay anything.
Would you do
It was
like
the
a suit?
worst
Right.
assumption they could have made.
It-
By it saying BA 0, they automatically were like, they're not offering anything. So if there was any takeaway to all of this, staying positive and all of that, is don't assume anything for the seller if you're a buyer agent.
That's my
You
massive
don't
point.
know
In
what
realist-
they're going to do
correct.
because they don't know what they're going to do.
Laura, I think
How-
that also plays into, I love that, I think that
Yes.
also plays into just simply making offers. Right
Make
now,
the
we've got higher
offer.
days on market,
Yep.
and I have sellers that will move on price.
Exactly.
And they're not ready to make the price reduction, but they're willing to negotiate, and
Right.
they just need offers written, and we as
It is
agents, if
crazy.
they want the
Yes.
house,
So true.
we should be writing the offer.
Exactly.
I-
Don't,
so
in other words, get
those
out of your
feel-
own way,
those
get out
feel
of your
that
own, yeah,
list price is
exactly.
their bottom line.
Right.
I was also doing showings the week before, and I actually showed a house that had the 0%. Jennifer does calls, she had told me to ask for the Form 220
Yeah.
right before.
Yeah.
So I was asking for that, and I had asked her, and she actually sent me one that didn't have the 0 on it. Even though it said 0, I still asked for that, and I said, I totally understand if you don't have it already, I'm just trying to get an idea, so that way I can go into it knowing, hey, what am I gonna have to tell my buyers?
Yep.
And they ended up, they were very helpful about it too.
Yeah,
So-
I think most agents are going to be. I do think that, I mean, even if we look at our relationships and our marriages, they would all be far better if we didn't assume. You know what I mean? In all fairness, in everything that we do. When I'm looking at coaching, real estate, all of it, that is the biggest thing I hang on, right? Do not assume. It makes an ass out of you and me. Like, in all fairness, so that is a huge takeaway. And this one, write the freaking offer.
Yeah.
Write the
Because
offer.
the sellers don't even know what they're willing to do until they see it in writing.
And I do, here's one thing I do wanna talk about too, is if you go to multiple offers, I do think we should all be adjusting our seller net sheets and our seller comparison sheets so that they can see those clearly. That's what we're already looking at, is how do we explain this in terms of seller net?
So think,
that
also,
was my problem.
think of seller concessions, buyer asking, we've been dealing with that for years, right? It's kinda gone away a little bit because of the prices and it's definitely a seller's market, but buyers ask sellers and have asked sellers to pay a portion of their closing costs forever. And the buyer did not know how much, if any, the seller would pay of their closing costs, and it didn't screw anything up. It's the same thing. They just don't know how much the seller, if any, is going to pay of their no buyer's agent fee. So instead of closing costs, think of it as a buyer's agent fee. They just, you don't know till you make the offer. Ask.
What do we do with our current listing agreements that like are September, October?
Strike through buyer agent, so you've got your commission at the top, you're gonna need to adjust that if you accounted for paying a buyer agent. Strike through initial the new, strike through the buyer agent on the lower half, and then ask them if they wanna fill out 220.
What about charge on the market?
Same thing.
What about your under contract? Still the same?
Does it
Still
close
think
before
about
the 17th?
19?
Did they go under contract prior to August 1st?
Yes.
So you have the MLS sheet?
I have the MLS sheet.
I-
That's what I was told, yeah.
Yes. I think, now are you representing the buyer
A
or
listing.
the listing? I would go ahead and send the 220. My seller's paying it, we've already agreed to
Yeah.
that in the terms of our
It's always at
contract.
the 220, but I don't need to adjust it, so it's South Carolina. I have both actually, but for the South Carolina, do I need to adjust anything for?
No, if you went under contract prior to August
Okay,
1st.
just send the 220.
Yeah.
David,
Yes, ma'am.
can we talk about your postcard?
Thanks for asking.
I'm just curious how you came up with it. I'll talk to you later about it.
Rabbit holes.
Dusty?
Am I wrong in thinking I'm not gonna chase a 220 showing every property? If my client calls me, hey, let's go see this property, I'm under client, you know,
I'm gonna touch you 2 ways.
okay.
If I was coaching you, I would say to you, I don't care if you chase the 220, I do care that you make the conversation with the listing agent prior to showing that house.
Yeah, okay.
So then I would say to you, ask them, right?
Yeah,
Let's
yeah.
not assume they're not, let's not assume they are. Start the conversation about compensation when you make that phone call. Would I be guiding my clients not to show it? No, but I know enough about real estate that I know that every piece of the puzzle can be negotiated.
Right, that's what.
You know, like, so, and again, in that scenario, you have enough people around you to call. Hey, I'm walking in